becomes very important. So what we have for you today in terms of the agenda is a description by my colleague Gemma, who's online, to talk about the work of the World Bank on the overall perspective on the end-to-end digital ecosystem. Then we will turn to Massamba to talk about the extremely innovative work that is coming out of his group. And we will then turn to EBRD, and Dimitri, I think, is online, and our colleague Jan-Willem should join us soon. He's running late in another session. And followed by Alexandra Soezer from UNDP to talk about the work of UNDP, and Alex is online as well. So with that, perhaps let me hand it over to Gemma. Gemma, you have the floor to talk about the work of the World Bank.
Thank you, Chandra. And good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, everyone, and greetings from Washington, D.C. So I'm going to be presenting the work stream from the World Bank side under this Digital for Climate partnership. First, before we jump into the digital infrastructure and the overall ecosystem, we wanted to highlight what are the challenges that we are aiming to address through this collaboration and building digital infrastructure in the ecosystem. So as many of you know, the Paris Agreement set up this bottom-up approach, which provides the flexibility to countries to choose their approach in achieving the climate goals. And this bottom-up nature also comes with increased complexity and diversity of reporting and verification mechanisms to report. And so this might lead to more heterogeneous markets, increased fragmentation, and maybe limited transparency and liquidity. On the right side of the slide, you see a caption of the challenges mapped by the Task Force of Scaling Voluntary Carbon Markets, where after surveying a large pool of stakeholders, they map bottlenecks across the supply chain. At the demand side, at the supply side, they would see issues in the double counting of carbon, such as double claim, double counting. At the market instrument level, they would see a lack of centralized registries for compliance and voluntary carbon markets. And at the demand side, they would see, for example, limited visibility of the project lifecycle. So with these emerging challenges in scaling up the carbon markets, there is a significant opportunity for digital infrastructure and digital technologies to streamline and underpin these post-2020 carbon markets. And so basically the framework through which this Digital for Climate partnership operates is the end-to-end digital ecosystem that you see in the screen, starting from the digital methodologies, then the digital MRVs, which through emerging technologies such as sensors, meters, and satellite, we can improve better ways to collect and verify data, which then it can be aggregated at the national MRV system, which supports the verification of units, and then this data is reflected in national carbon registries. Registries can also use tokenization instruments to create digital representations of the carbon credits and be able to trade them and have more fungibility. And all this transaction and data will be then reflected to the Climate Action Data Trust, which is one of the recently launched digital infrastructure from the World Bank, together with the partners of Government of Singapore and AIDA. And then finally, this data can be leveraged by the service layer and unleash and unlock private sector innovation. So this is in a nutshell. And then on the top, you see the digital workflow that UNDP will also explain a bit more at the end. So basically, this is the main framework through which the Digital for Climate partnership is working, connecting and digitizing the different components of the ecosystem. So now moving to the World Bank Climate Warehouse Program, we have a number of work streams that we are piloting, such as connecting the digital MRV system to our World Bank Carbon Registry with EBRD. We are also designing national carbon registries and also deploying them to our country clients. We're also conceptualizing and designing tokenization instruments. And finally, the Climate Action Data Trust. It has been recently launched, soft launch in October 26, and it will be officially launched in December during the Asia Summit organized by AIDA. So and we would like to focus today on the Climate Action Data Trust, as our colleagues will be focusing on other work streams here. So what is the Climate Action Data Trust? The Climate Action Directorate is a global platform that aims to aggregate all the registry data in one place, creating this harmonization and aggregation, and then the data would be secured on blockchain technology with the aim to connect and also create communication across decentralized registries. And so through harmonizing, aggregating this data, we are in a way putting all these different formats, different data in one place where a service layer can also leverage it in the future. And so we had, since 2019, the World Bank had been prototyping and testing this platform together with the Innovation Lab and the Climate Change Group. And we have been testing the platform with different blockchain technologies such as Ethereum, Hyperledger, and also blockchain as a software with Kaleido. And in the third and the final simulation, we did jointly this simulation with Shia Network, creating this open source operational prototype. And we tested the prototype with 30 participating organizations, including 11 national governments, as well as 75 individual testers across 58 testing sessions, validating the technical architecture, the installation, the data model granularity. So what is the taxonomy that the market needs to aggregate and harmonize this data? And finally, also enhancing the documentation on this platform. On the right side, you see more granularly the participants. We had country governments, Chile, Japan, Peru, Rwanda, Senegal, Singapore, Sweden, Switzerland, UK, and Uganda. Also the 5 independent standards, as well as observers such as UNFCCC, UNDP, and EBRD. And so based on this feedback, we handed over the assets and the platform to the new governance that was defined by the recommendations that were submitted in the governance consultations convened by the government of Singapore and AIDA. And therefore, with this new governance in place, it will be launched in December 6th. And this new governance will have a technical committee, a council, and a user forum that will be together leading the mandate and the strategy of the platform. The technical committee will be further developing the technical architecture and the data model. And the user forum will be listening to the private sector to keep evolving the platform based on the market demand. So I will pause here, happy to answer any questions at the end of the session, and I will pass it over to Chandra. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Gemma. And the main thing to note is that the idea is to put together end-to-end digital infrastructure which is anchored around a metadata layer which contains information from all the connected registries and therefore gives transparency and visibility to what is happening in all the connected registries. So independent standards, sovereign registries, as more and more registries are created or developed by sovereigns to give that common platform. That I think is the key takeaway. But Massamba, over to you on the work that UNFCCC Innovation Hub has been doing.
Thank you, Chandra. Good afternoon again to all of you. As you all know, when you are a standard setter or a methodology developer, you would like to have standard or methods that are broadly applicable. You don't want to have methodologies that are applicable only on some region and not in others. You do not want to have methodologies that are usable in some sector and not in others. You try to have something that is as broadly applicable as possible. But at the same time, you would like to have your method, standard, or methodology being able to accommodate the specificities, because it's very important to take into account the context under which a methodology is applied. At the same time, we want to have requirements in the methodology that are enough objective in the sense that they do not provide room for interpretation. The requirement need to be very clear so that if an assessor is assessing compliance of an activity with a methodology, it is easy for the assessor. There is no possibility of several interpretations of the same requirement. And at the same time, we want the methodology to lead to accurate outcome, and we want to ensure environmental integrity. Or if you want to address all these things, broad applicability while taking into account specificities, and at the same time you want high level of objectivity, environmental integrity and accuracy, the result is you end up with something that is extremely complex. And this has been in the past the main criticism against the standard the UNFCCC process was developing. That's good. It ensures environmental integrity, but it's just too complex. And I remember one of the methodologies that was developed from aggregation of several methodology, SCM6. It was a very nice methodology, but extremely complex, and we were in the obligation to cut this methodology into small pieces because the user were simply lost in this methodology. And why is it like that? It is like that because our methodology are asking to the user to do things that they are not prepared to do. We are asking them to demonstrate. We are asking them to establish baseline. We are asking them to demonstrate additionality, to calculate emission reduction. These are not things that they have the capability to do. It's why they're in the obligation to take the services of a consultant that will actually do it for them. They are not able to address this type of issue. So this is where digitalization is really, really important because it helps us solve this issue in the best way forward. Digitalization is very well known in supporting climate action, and this is why more and more we are talking about a twin green digital transition, meaning digital will be critical for the green transition. So that is well known, that digital has to be leveraged for climate action. What is less known is the role digital technology can play in climate policy making. And this is the focus of this working group that has been set, and this is the focus of our discussion today. So we try to leverage digital technology to serve the problems that we wanted to address. So what we have done is, in a first stage, we made a first type of, let's say, simplification attempt to simplify our methodology for our user by introducing default parameters and instruments like that will make easier the use of our methodology. But it was still not enough because people keep on complaining that our methodology was still too complex. We introduced the concept of POA, which was also something very important, a good way forward, a step forward, but it was still not enough, and standardized baseline later. So the vision that we have finally put forward was to say, let's keep our methodology complex, but let's do our best. Let's do our best, sorry, so that the user of our methodology do not see their complexity. And this is where digitalization really fully enter into picture. Okay, next slide. One of the very important steps in digitizing our methodology was to develop what we call a modular approach. Because if you want to digitize, we have more than 200 methodology under the UNFCCC process, and trying to digitize this methodology one by one would be just not possible. So we have started, one methodology has been already digitized, another one is following, but able to digitize the entire set of more than 200 methodology, this is simply a very difficult task. So what we have tried to do is to have a modular approach, and it's about identifying in our methodology the, let's say, what we call atomistic element. What are the key elements that need to be put together to form a methodology? Because while the number of methodologies that can be developed is almost infinite, the material that is used that need to be combined to make a methodology is actually limited. So what was really important for us is to identify these key components that need to be put together for the development of a methodology and form a kind of library of element of methodology that will be what will be digitized. Now, once you have that, the next step is to have series of question and response, because it's a web-based system. What we have developed is a web-based system that will allow the user of our methodology to come to a website and then provide information on the activities that they are undertaking. The system will ask a question, and then they will respond to the question by providing information that is directly available to them, like what are the key technologies that your methodology is using, where your activity is taking place, what are the technologies your activity is using, and so and so. So the response to this question first allows the system to understand the type of activity that is currently being undertaken. So for example, is it the implementation of renewable energy? Is it an activity of energy efficiency? Is it an activity of GHG emission avoidance, and so and so? Through this dialogue between the web system and the user, the web system will be able to understand the type of activity that is being implemented by the user. And once clarity is, once the system has clarity about the type of activity that is being undertaken, it will bring the key formula that will be used to assess additionality, to identify baseline, and then to determine the GHG emission reduction based on the requirement of the methodology. So once all these elements are in place, the data that are required for the system to do all these things will be also requested, and the user of the system will only load data. So data on the level of activity, on several elements that are related to the activity but available to the user. So once all these systems are in place, the system can assess additionality, can identify the baseline, so it's no more the user of the system who will determine what is the baseline of the activity, but the system itself will determine what the baseline is. It's not the user of the system that will demonstrate that the activity is additional, but the web system will be the one establishing additionality. It will be also the one determining the GHG emission reduction. Yeah. So this system is part of something that is bigger. It's a combination of several things. So we did the digitalization of methodology, and in parallel we have developed what we call a baseline standard, which is an attempt to have one single approach for the determination of all type of baseline. Without digital technology, it's something difficult to use by somebody who is not an expert in baseline setting. And even the expert can be lost in a system if you have only one single methodology for the determination of all type of baseline. This is something complex. But the digitalization of methodology allow to enable to do that. So combined with also an additionality tool and combined with standardization and the development of standardized baseline, these 4 elements, digitalization, the standardized baseline, baseline standard, and additionality tool combined allow to, they synergize each other and allow to use the system in an efficient manner without, let's say, the user of the system seeing any type of complexity. So we can see here all the different information that need to be provided for the system to come up with an outcome. So for the time being, it is only used to generate in an automated manner a project design document, which is what the activity developer has to submit to the regulatory body for the assessment of its activity. But it can be also used for automated monitoring and the assessment of the monitoring outcome of an activity. So all in all, it really allows to have the activity document developed in an automated manner and the activity assess also in an automated manner. It's a kind of, we can use it as a smart contract where if the data related to the activity are provided to the system can, in an automated manner, determine what are the impact in terms of GHG emission reduction and issue credit in an automated manner. So the next step, last slide. So this system combined with what the World Bank is doing, for example, in terms of the MRV, will be extremely powerful because currently we can use digitized methodology to develop in an automated manner PDD to determine the impact of an activity in an automated manner, but we need to enter the data in a manually on the web system. So it means that the user need to be in front of the web system and respond to the question. But if it is combined with a DMRV, you will not need to enter the system. The data will come directly from the DMRV system, will be fed into the web-based system, and the outcome will be generated in an automated manner. So the next step, as I said, we have applied this to one important methodology, ACM2, which is the one for renewable energy. We plan to do it this year on another methodology with applicable to West. And then we want also to use it for charging of battery, for e-bus and some other regenerative agriculture and some other new application. Be integrated with the warehouse of the World Bank, the work that the EBRD is doing, as well as the workflow on which the UNDP is working to have an end-to-end system that is completely automated and full automatization of the activity cycle. So back to you, Chandra.
It's extremely exciting, and those of you who've been involved in the carbon market will recognize how disruptive and transformative it will be if your PDDs could be answered through AI-based tool that Massamba just described, and greatly simplify the complexity. And if that then gets linked to digital MRV, which now Jan-Willem will talk about, you see the potential of totally streamlining the process and potentially scaling it up to the levels that are necessary to address the challenge of climate change. So I'll give the floor over to Jan-Willem, and Jan-Willem is the head of international climate policy and engagement, if I got it correct, at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and his colleague Dimitri will also come in. But over to you, Jan-Willem, and Gemma will continue to move the slides. So Please go ahead.
Okay, I feel yellow today, so I take the yellow mic. Thank you, Chandra and Massamba, for your introductions. I was slightly confused in the beginning because there were people that said UNFCCC Pavilion. There's another one over there. In any case, we found this one, and if we would have a very good app, then I could have found it earlier, but you see, there are limitations as to digitalization as well. But nonetheless, thank you for being here. So at EBRD, we are also a multilateral development bank like the World Bank, and we are very actively involved in climate finance and developing markets in the regions, in the countries we work in. We also have a long track record in being active in the carbon markets, and that include domestic markets like the emissions trading scheme in the EU and in Kazakhstan, as well as the let's say previous Kyoto Protocol period of JI, CDM and Article 17 trading. Now we are facing a new decade with new potentials. We are very pleased Article 6 got approved, let's say in principle, in Glasgow, although there are a couple of details still to be worked at. But that's a very encouraging development. Now another area where the bank is paying attention to is digitalization. And through digitalization we can achieve a couple of things, which were already mentioned, but for us the cost reduction effect, to lower the transaction cost, to make the access to finance easier, are the key ones. And this is also the reason that we, let's say, so if we digitalize, for example, the monitoring, reporting and verification, that will enable, in the first place, ourselves to report more on our results on projects to the bank, to the board and our shareholders. It will help also to inform the countries we are working in what are the results of our projects. There might be then monetization potentials in markets, whether domestic or international. And it's also, I think, increasingly, and that's a link still to be built, is what eventually the capital markets will ask for, as to, okay, if I buy a green bond or a transition bond, does it have an effect? Yeah, is it real, etc. So, but in order for that, we need huge amount of data, huge amount of information. And it's really about making sure we get the data at the lowest cost available to all these markets that I just described. So we have been working on this, let's say as we are mainly a project-based bank, we have been focusing on testing, developing a digitalization of the MRV on a couple of solar projects in Jordan. And that was then the basis for a result-based payment from funded by Spain that helped to basically also to further finance these projects. I'm going to pass over to Dimitri. I see him. Are you in the office? Or at home, Dimitri?
Hello, everyone. Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Yeah, thanks, Jan-Willem, for handing me. I'm not in the office, but
sorry, Dimitri, wait. Hang on. They need to increase the sound.
Ah, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Better now? Yeah. All right. Yeah. Thanks, Jan-Willem, for the introduction. And yeah, the background is actually what we get in the office, but I'm not in the office. Yeah.
Dimitri, can you put your microphone closer? Then we can
Well,
better hear you.
I'm trying to speak as loud as I can.
Yeah. Okay.
Is it any better? Hello? Can you hear me better now?
Yeah,
can
now it's
hear
okay.
you. Yes.
Yeah, maybe it's it seems to be in the room. Okay, I'll try to speak right in the mic. Yeah, thanks for the introduction. To save time, let's just maybe quickly run through the key elements of the piece of work that we're planning to do as part of this Digital for Climate initiative together with the other partners. So as Jan-Willem has indicated, EBRD has already put together a pilot digital MRV system for climate activity level MRV that's been already rolled out to solar projects. This is depicted here in this slide. Yeah, and then so basically what we've decided to do is, since this is a joint effort with several partners, we cannot kind of cover everything, so we decided to take it piece by piece. And in this effort, EBRD together with the World Bank will attempt to connect the two systems, which we have already both running and piloted at different levels, which perform sometimes coherent and interlinked functions, but we will try to kind of pilot the interconnection between these two systems. So the digital MRV system that EBRD has in place is essentially a project level, activity level software solution that is cloud-based, that basically provides direct data acquisition, aggregation, immutable storage, checks, and calculation output of the climate results, climate output. So in this case, the tons of CO2 reduced. It provides the functionality for some verification and validation of the data, and an output of the result. On the other hand, the World Bank has put in place the integrated enhanced registry system, which builds on two functions, both registry and the national MRV system, essentially, which is an aggregation, a database of the activities happening at the country level. So we will aim to, and yeah, please, next slide, Gemma. We will aim to, through this engagement as part of the Digital for Climate, we realize basically there is efficiencies and scales to be gained by connecting the systems. And the registry and the MRV system at the project level are the cornerstones of the entire process. This is where the generation of the asset happens, and where the climate action, climate activity happens. So these are the two core elements which we need to kind of interconnect and see how we can exchange data between. The data exchange has to be going both ways. So we need to make sure these are basically connectable. These can communicate in the same language. They exchange the same data in the same format, same schedule, and so on. As part of this, this is a learning for us. So we will document the process, and we'll take the lessons from this exchange and see how that can then be kind of spilled over into the rest of the ecosystem that we're trying to build. And we will also be using, to the extent possible, the digitalization of the methodology that Massamba has just outlined earlier. And in terms of some specifics of what we're aiming to do, next slide, Gemma, please. Essentially, what we're talking about here is that so we have our digital MRV system operating already on several pilot solar projects across the region. So we will use those projects as the test base. We will create a test country and a test project, and the test project will use the actual real-time data that we're getting from the project, but it will be kind of obfuscated or concealed to avoid confidentiality issues, but the data will be sort of, underlying data will be sourced from the actual projects. Then that test project will then be first, it will be created in the national registry through the World Bank registry system. We will exchange the core data for the project, its ID, its location, its type of technology. Then once the project is set up, the real-time data exchange will be piloted for a certain period. We'll modulate the exchange of the actual results of the climate mitigation outcomes being generated on a regular interval, which we will define. and see how the exchange goes. The methodology, the underlying methodology that will be used is the ACM 002 of CDM for renewable energy projects. And basically, we will demonstrate the two-way data exchange, and in the end, it will result in the generation of the certified emission reductions in the registry, which will then can be cancelled. So we'll demonstrate a full flow of the carbon asset from the generation to the use. There's a tentative timeline here that we have laid out, and we hope to get some kind of real results to show by the end of next year toward COP 2028, where we'll be able to showcase this further. And happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dimitri, and thanks, Jan-Willem. So you see the integration of the activity level digital MRV system to national level MRV systems is what I think the cooperation between the EBRD and the World Bank is trying to achieve, and that allows the linking of project-based or activity-based monitoring, reporting, verification system to flow straight into the registry should the methodology, and the methodology that Massamba talked about was ACM 02. So you see the MRV system was linked to ACM 02 as well, because it's grid connected renewables, and therefore you see that from the perspective of digitization, we almost have the complete flow. And if you were to allow the full digital workflow to take place, then you have the end-to-end digital ecosystem for grid-connected renewables in place, and all of it is modular and interoperable. And so we'll now turn to UNDP Alexandra Soezer, who's the climate change technical advisor, to talk about that digital workflow itself. So Alex, over to you. Alex, you're muted. Alex. Okay.
Apologies for that.
Yeah. Now it's good.
Thanks. First slide, please. Sylvia or Gemma. Yeah. So first of all, good afternoon, good morning. It's my pleasure to be part of this innovation session today. Thank you for the opportunity to share UNDP's digital work to operationalize Article 6 and beyond. So UNDP receives requests from several countries who are seeking support for the development of digital systems, and this goes beyond the development of carbon registries. Countries are also in need of broader transparency systems to respond to UNFCCC's reporting requirements under the enhanced transparency framework of the Paris Agreement. And here we see an exciting opportunity in a global digital public good, or TPG, because it can help to avoid duplication of structures and costs. It can ease information exchange, and it lowers IT implementation and lifetime costs and vendor logins. And of course, an open code of a global DPG will also increase public trust in digital systems. Next slide. UNDP is building up a modular open source code base, co-designed with countries we support for easy replication and interoperable with others in the ecosystem. It will be open for all countries to build or implement in each of their national climate or environmental entities. It will support effective data management. It is also future-proofing, which means that collectively investing for future development is possible, and it will provide interoperability with other major platforms, including the UNDP Carbon Cooperation Platform, which I will talk about in more detail in a minute, the UNFCCC Global Registry, and the Climate Action Data Trust. And it is supported by a community of practice of countries for knowledge sharing. Next slide. And I will now dive deeper into UNDP's ITMO project workflow platform. As a digital solution to improve ITMO project implementation processes, we have set up the Carbon Cooperation Platform. It consists of a public landing page which explains at high level the ITMO workflow. And the security of the platform was assessed by the UN International Computing Center and was approved by UNDP's information security team. All ITMO processes can be managed and implemented on the platform through registered country users, validators, verifiers, and project developers. And the key feature of the platform is that it is modular and therefore easily amendable and scalable. So new countries can be easily added and at low cost. And with the customization option, we can offer this digital platform to countries that currently don't have digital systems or workflow systems in place. To improve monitoring processes of ITMO projects, we are including web apps and photo monitoring features to the platform. The web apps are linked to the monitoring module on the platform to allow project proponents to upload monitoring information directly to the platform and even directly from a mobile device. And on the platform, the information can then be directly accessed by a country focal point in the government and, of course, by the project verifiers. So next slide. From the public website, a user can then log in after registering, and everyone can register as a project developer. And here you can see the registration page for a project developer. And next slide. Here you can see the registration page for a validator or a verifier. We have a two-factor authentication and authorization process to restrict what users have access to on the platform. Next slide. In the country section, which you can see here, new countries can be created and configured. And within the country section, there is flexibility to select the different roles within a workflow. So, for example, the role of a project developer, a validator, verifier, the Article 6 secretariat in a host country, a buyer country, etc. And project developer registration can then be either done on the platform or in cases where a country has a national registry, it can also be done in a national registry. And the link to the registry is then just added on the platform. The documents needed for registration can be flexibly added. It can be decided by a country administrator which documents and how many to include, and each step can be fully customized. So on the platform, as many countries as desired can be added and configured, again, step by step and role by role. The monitoring sections can then be also replicated several times for each monitoring season during the crediting period of the project. And once a country is configured, the process flow will be the same for all projects within this country. While the country section is restricted to the country admin, the project section can be accessed by different users. But all users have to be previously configured by the country admin, and their roles have to be they are determined in the configuration of the country section. In the country section, only documents and process flows can be seen that have been configured before, and only the country administrator has the power to approve or reject applications, requests for authorizations or issuances. Next slide. On the last two slides, you can see a monitoring app in the monitoring section of the platform. This app was created for an agricultural project, specifically for a specific methodology for a project in Ghana. The monitoring parameters follow the requirements of the CDM methodology, AMS 3AU, so methane emission reductions by adjusted water management practice in rice cultivation. And on the last slide, you can see report archives, which will be created for each year and each farmer, and can also see the farmers can also see the carbon revenues generated per year based on the area over which alternate wetting and drying, which is the activity that leads to emission reductions, is applied. And of course, in addition, application of irrigation events have to be recorded, and proof of these events has to be uploaded in the form of photos. And in order to offer this as an end-to-end digital carbon market system, we are currently in the process of linking it, the platform, to the World Bank Climate Action Data Trust. And to facilitate this, we are opening an API to retrieve information through a security token to be able to transfer data. The goal is to have this system in place in time for first issuances in Q2 of 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. And as you can see, we are well within the reach of an end-to-end digital system for the carbon market. We just have the pieces. We are now working on integrating it, making it modular, interoperable, so that different participants and stakeholders in the market will be able to access it in a manner that dramatically reduces the time, the transaction cost, creates greater transparency, flexibility, and potentially creates the platform to scale up carbon markets way beyond where we are. But many of us who are in the carbon market know that even at current modest levels, the infrastructure is close to breakdown because of the number of activities that are taking place. And if we were to scale it 20 times of what it is today, the current systems needs to be totally reconfigured. And the effort in this working group, and I must add, of others, including the Gold Standard, Vera, all of them have started putting together working groups. AITA has put together a working group, recognizing the opportunity created by digital technologies for us to upgrade the infrastructure to make it fit for purpose, to scale up carbon markets to the levels that we need to get to. I think that is the overall objective here, and I hope we've conveyed to you a sense of how close we are and how excited we are as a group of multilaterals moving towards creating that infrastructure linked to create the level of transparency and trust that is needed. So with that, I wanted to open it up for questions. Certainly, Carlo, how much time do you? Okay, so since he's distracted, we can have time for questions. So anybody in the audience, please go ahead. Introduce yourself and... Yes, please go ahead.
Myself, Kaushal Goyal. I am from KBS, and my company is a validation verification body accredited by UNFCCC, CCC, VERA, GS, and many other schemes. So, just wondering to know whether third party has a role after this digitalization. Like we can see the data flowing from the project owner to the registry. So is there any role for third parties to validate or verify the data? Thank you.
Absolutely. Maybe I'll let Alex add to it, but you saw in the workflow that there is an accreditation process for a validator and a verifier in the digital workflow. So there will continue to be a role, but once the methodologies are fully digitized, the roles will need to change. But Alex, do you want to come in, and Massamba maybe want to add?
Yes. Yes. So in the ITMO process flow, there is, of course, a role for a validator verifier. This is a key component in each ITMO project. And we have provided this opportunity in the ITMO workflow carbon cooperation platform. So a validator and then verifiers will have to register and will access project information in order to be able to validate and verify projects. So this will not change from Kyoto. So it will continue there's a continued need for validators and verifiers. Yes.
So definitely we will continue to need validator and verifier, but then their role will change. So for example, in the case where methodology are digitized, you do not need as validator to check whether the way additionality was done is correct, whether the baseline that is selected is the right one, whether the GHG emission reduction determined are the correct one. And in a situation where you are connected to a digital MRV, you do not even need to assess the quality of the data, or you will just maybe some small sampling to check whether everything is in place. The system for data collection is working correctly. But in a fully digitized system, yes, we'll continue to need validator and verifier, but their role will be completely different and focus on only very specific things. Yeah. So I see that.
Yeah, if there are no other questions, we do have Thomas. Thomas, if you, I wanted to check if you wanted to give closing remarks, but I wanted to make sure there are no other questions from the audience.
This is better here. Closing remarks, it's funny a little bit because I should say also something on the opening remarks. And what is the point here is that we are in a very early stage of digitalization. I think there are different uses possible from the voluntary carbon market, from the result-based carbon finance, when we have programs, and of course also domestic policies could use it later. So we have the whole bunch of non-authorized ITMOs, but we have also the question how we relate to the official compliance certificate. So as already mentioned, the roles has to change and to be adapted to the criteria we will have in the UNFCCC process. You know, maybe that we are just talking about Article 6 and we'll do this also in the next 24 hours or so. So this is a very crucial point where we have not finally decided about the formats. So it's very difficult to adapt now this process, but we have hopes that we will fulfill our Glasgow mandates until next year as is planned. We have not decided last year to do everything now, but everything has been discussed. So the progress in the next 12 months is also very relevant for the digitalization. And I think the main process is that we ask in the digitalization, what are the inputs parameters, whether we can measure correctly, have a higher guarantee of the input figures. So I think yes, and it depends also what is going on. When I think about satellite surveillance for RED+, for example, for forests, that's important. Maybe also for agriculture, that we are going away from difficult and non-reliable assumption about what happens in the project. That it's about the transaction costs, but I have also the hope that the climate aspects are more realistic. That's very important. And with these hopes, I end my closing remarks. And I hope some of you will stay for the next session. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much. And most of you know Thomas, so there's no need to introduce himself. But Thomas Forth is from the German government and a long time supporter of the carbon markets and the effort. So thank you, Thomas, for that.
Okay, thank you.